Hello everyone and welcome to the extreme deathmatch between Izotope Iris2 and Bitwig Sampler. Now, Ozone is one of the products made by Izotope. It's like the world's most famous mastering tool or something like that. So obviously if they're going to make a plugin or anything, it should be good. I personally own the RX6 from them and Ozone and Iris, and like they're all pretty good. But so this is the Iris. I got it on sale for about, I think, 40 USD. It's worth 150 without sale. So that's what you know about the price range now. The sampler is just included straight up inside of Bitwig, and you don't have to pay for it aside from what you pay for in Bitwig. And now looking at these, here's what's up. We have 4 samplers. And I believe it's 4 samplers max inside of Iris2. Iris2 has these 5 LFOs. It has these 5 envelopes, and it has this controller section for the key tracking, which can be looked at like that. Now you're gonna be like, wow, it's so many more features than what's down here in the Bitwig sampler. Not true. If you do the add the ADSR, here we go. We have envelopes, duplicate this enough times, and then you have 5 envelopes. So now we're going to be like, okay, well, now it's the same because you can do that. You can do that with the LFOs. You can't get quite this sort of customization with those LFOs. So this is a little unique. We don't have any like custom LFO tool yet, which I believe is coming soon. But there's also this macro. Again, you can just add macros, LFOs, whatever you want down here, and you can macro to whoever you want. And now we're going to be like, okay, well, hey, there's 4 samplers in here. Cool. So I can just group this and duplicate it 4 times. And now I have also 4 samplers right here too. And I can put all my macros and stuff here and macro anything I want inside this sampler. And any of the effects that go inside of here, I can macro from over here. So that's fantastic because now we know that when it comes to any send effects or master effects or any of this enveloping stuff, it can be done right inside of this instrument layer and can be performed to the same degree inside of here. Now, what's different is obviously how the chorus, distortion, delay, and reverb is all going to sound. There's the difference inside of these like little LFOs. Well, these are named differently here. This key tracking velocity aftertouch mod wheel. There's an expressions macro sort of thing here, but that's called not the envelope follower. It is called the expressions, and these things are all named differently. I'm not a professional with the MIDI stuff or anything like that, so I'm not going to compare anything, though that there is a velocity, there is a release, which could be aftertouch. I don't know. Yep. We don't have a mod wheel macro thing in here, so that's kind of cool. However, I think you can just pull it up here in the MIDI somewhat in here. Yeah, the modulation one is the same as this mod wheel. Cool. So now that's all the same. There's a global filter sort of thing here that you can put on, and that's all great and good. Again, you can do it in here. There's a bunch of different filter types. If you want to get different filter types, just whip out like an EQ2 or EQ5 and go ahead and make whatever kind of weird filter shape you want, and then A, macro it, or B, use the shift knob to get the same effect, because this will just shift the EQ like downwards, so making this like a weird high pass filter basically. So back to just the sampler. Now we're going to want to kind of test out maybe the quality of each individual thing. One important thing to point out though is that there's this global glide. There's a global intensity and output. You can do these when they're grouped together. You would have to, say, grab this glide and then make a macro and attach it to every glide. The downfall to that is that then the macro that you have here is going to work in a percentage, kind of like from 1 to 100, 0 to 100, whereas this just shows you the global glide from 0 to 2000 milliseconds. So that's kind of sad. You lose how many milliseconds you're doing when you're using this. You'd have to do it by ear then. So joke's on you. Same thing with intensity, whatever the intensity is defined as in this, you could set it up in Bitwig as well. There's individual view windows and gains and mutes and solos, just like we got. There's a little mixing window, so you can do all the stuff, you know, side by side. And I think there's an all window, which just brings us to like all the samplers at once. Okay, so now the final question sort of thingy is like, how good does it play things? So now we have to look for some synth hits to play and see how it goes when I pitch bend them, or I mean move them up from their default root tone key. Alright, so for this test, we're going to take a sound that sounds like this. It's going to be completely dry, so we can mess with the reverb inside of the plugin separate from everything else, and test, like, you know, the way that it stretches the audio, which, from what I can tell right now, isn't going to be my favorite method, but that's fine. So I have that there, and then, so right away, here's one sort of downside, is I can just take this audio file right to the sampler. I cannot put it to this thing here in Iris2, which is sad. Okay, here we go. So we have this FabFilter Pro Q to analyze the visuals, sort of. So as we can see, there's a minor difference in this waveform compared to this one. This waveform seems to be retaining some extra high end. Other than that, they look pretty similar when played, and they sound very similar when played. Now, what's going to get interesting is, like, when I move down. So if I move down, like, say just one, it'd sound like I'm using the synth. Again, that retains more high end, like real high end, like really, really high end. So that's interesting. They still sound both comparable when just moving down, you know, like one whole tone or semitone. So now let's try like an octave. See, this is what gets weird, is now the sound gets longer. Both of these options do not sound like the regular synth anymore. When we go here, this is the situation where this comes out better because now I'm not hearing so much filtering in this one. This one sounds more filtered. This one sounds pretty full still. Testing. That's just reverb. Which leads me to say that the Iris sampling engine is better. Doesn't matter how much better, even if it's just a little bit, it's still, like, better. So now we know that riddle now. This loses some of the high end when you go down. This one does not, which is like, okay. So I think this one is, the Iris is probably your better choice if you want to get, you know, more pitch bend out of your sample. Though I would never understand why you'd take a synth like this and mess with it that much. If I were to do that, I would stay within 5 semitones of like the root tone. Because it doesn't sound too much different in both situations anyways. And like I said, you're just losing some high end. You could always just EQ that back in, do a little tiny bit of distortion, get it to work. There's all sorts of like weird things you can do in, you know, this one, like that. Which is like, this is like an EQ and play position, but it gets even more interesting when you do something like that. And you can continue to do these sorts of weird lines everywhere like that. And now I'm making something that would be much harder to replicate inside of Bitwig, because now what I've got is vertically is a filter now. So when it gets to that point of the sample, it's going to play whatever I've drawn here. Which is just weirdness. Like, if you think about it, like, if you think about the filter that way, you'd have to figure out how to, like, you know, how it actually, like, applies in real sense. But, like, you can, you know, draw a sine wave in your... and then draw, like, extra crap. And that gets kind of weird, and that's cool about that. That would be much harder to do inside of, you know, the Bitwig sampler, and you would not be able to do it in the same way with the same line of thinking. So there's some, you know, some cool tools. I'm not going to go through. It's not like an Iris review. It's just comparing the two samplers together. And that's how it is. The Iris2 sampler is better in sound quality and with some features that might be more useful to people or not. But regardless, the sound engine is better. And I mean, that was kind of expected because there's nothing absurdly impressive about Bitwig's sound engine anyways. So yeah, thanks for watching. See ya.